290 of the 20-minute Tim's flagship podcast. I'm your host, Jamie, and I'm joined by Stephen.
That's right, Jamie. I'm here.
And Martin Melly.
You are joined by me as well.
And it is the New Look podcast now. It is the first home podcast of the new year. So before a further ado, before we begin, ladies and gentlemen. Yep.
To the Queen.
Somebody will clip that, Stephen, and absolutely ruin us for it. You might notice things have changed up a wee bit. We've improved the setup, individual cameras, great HD coverage of everyone's face, super close.
Oh, it's horrifying. I didn't realise I looked like that before now.
I don't want so much of my face on camera or on screen. You know, it's weird, and it freaks me out when I see some people actually watch this on their home televisions.
Oof.
Not just seedy little iPhones or little iPads.
Like 75-inch efforts up on the wall and all that. Horrifying.
I always thought it'd be on the silver screen. I just didn't think it'd be presenting Celtic podcast. Listen, Celtic are back in business this week. Celtic v Alloa. A match of football, Melly, or a match of boxing?
A bit of both, for some tough challenges, some terrible pitches and some terrible stadiums, but Celtic managed to get out alive, but with 3 injuries down, it wasn't ideal.
Not a classic. Not a classic by any means, but it was one of those ones that it's just a case of job done, just get through to the next round. What I would like to sit here and say is get through to the next round with as few injuries as possible. We'll come on to that. For very obvious reasons. That isn't possible. But as far as just getting through to the next round goes, it was job done. It wasn't a classic night of football. I think there's been a big reaction from it. All the reasons for which we'll get into tonight, of course. But I think, you know, it was a bit of a slog, really, and Celtic managed to get the job done.
Do you think how this a manager viewed it? Do you think he's thought, right, just get the boys out, get home and hosed, or do you think he viewed this as sort of a chance to bed in some new guys, a chance to try some things maybe that he wants to try out for the Rangers game? I'm looking at the likes of Gucci starting, Liam Scales starting, Yakimakis returns.
Gucci didn't start. So.
No, sorry, you're quite right. Maeda out left.
I think it's another game where we're just back from a winter break and the manager's obviously trying to balance things. There's players that played against Hibs who haven't had a lot of football recently, and there's players coming back from injury. But of course, with that pitch, Craig said it's 7 years old, that AstroTurf. It's on top of concrete basically, so guys like Julian, James Forrest, you're maybe not going to risk them, but it could have been a perfect game for guys like that in another world. But when the manager's looking at it, the Hibs performance was pretty good. With that one, I did notice, I was over the other side from Ange, I did notice something that I hadn't noticed in many games. He was visibly upset at some of the play, like throwing his hands and turned his back, like annoyed at some of the play. And I can understand that, like the pitch isn't great. We're trying to work our way in, but we have got massive games coming up and we need to improve in certain areas. Stephen
Ange strikes me as a sort of manager that doesn't just, you know, there's no such thing as a dead rubber, Franz Postecoglou. He's not just going to send some guys out to get some minutes in the legs. You know what I mean? He wants contributions. Do you think he got that?
Did anyone make such a claim for a starting place that the whole rule book has been torn up where we need to start reconsidering things? Probably not, but I think that's quite a high standard to hold people to be thrown into a game like that against that kind of opposition with that level of tactics on that pitch. I think it's quite difficult to stand out.
Why do we have these pitches, man? I know it's a long in the tooth argument, but there are teams, there's amateur teams, there's part-time teams, there's teams down south at a tiny wee level, get about 800 fans, they all play on grass. And then we've got Alloa part-time though, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're still a part-time team, but that pitch was absolutely abysmal. When you think about, you know, I know plastic pitches exist all over the world, but we're bringing these guys over from different countries, even like Cal McGregor who played his football here, they must take to these pitches and go, that's a disgrace.
We were talking on the way to this the New Look studio. We were talking about some of the stuff we used to play on when we were kids and all that red ash and all that. So I suppose it's an upgrade on that, but it's still not.
Is it though?
Yeah, it's definitely an upgrade on some of the shit I used to play on, Christ. But it's definitely not like professional football level. It's certainly not. I don't want to come across as like sneering here, but I don't really.
Sneer away, man.
I don't really want to be taking Celtic and sticking these international players out on that. Guys who have just arrived in the country.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, that's exactly. So no, I don't know. We've had this debate for years now. We're talking about the plastic pitches and all that. There doesn't seem to be any merit in it at all, other than cost saving for these clubs who probably can't maybe can't afford to maintain a decent pitch or whatever. I don't know. I've listened to it all, but
I don't know how much maintenance grass takes. I just look outside and it's there.
I have got some grass at my back. I've cut it a couple of times a year, and it still manages to look all right.
Yakimakis starts up front, Melly. Now I've been having this premonition for the past couple of weeks. I feel like he's been a wee bit hard done by Yakimakis, because people have more or less written him off because he missed a penalty. Striker misses penalty, and then that's the end of it.
Tough going, though, wasn't it?
I mean, it was a difficult, but it's not just his fault. You know what I mean? It's not like he was getting chances upon chances laid on a plate for him, and then he was missing them all. So I think there's maybe a bit of a redemption story needs to be happening. I've had this premonition that I think Yakimakis could be in for a Samaras Sunday in a couple of weeks against the Old Rangers. I thought he took his goal very well, though.
He did. It was a great cross from Scales and getting in at the front post. That's what you're looking for your striker, with that sort of mould of the guy. We've seen Kyogo do that a few times. I think he'd done it up at Dundee. We're going to need him, because we're looking at it now. Kyogo looks like he's going to be out for, depending on who you want to believe, it could be a while. Maeda, the instant replacement, gets called up for Japan, and we're starting to look thin again, despite bringing in 4 players in a couple of weeks. So it's a difficult one. We're now looking at Giakoumakis going, right, well, time to shine, son. This is it. You've got a run of games here, that fabled run of games that everybody claims they want. He's had to stay. I think he stayed behind after when the players went on a break and worked on his fitness over the winter break there. So this is it now. He played 90 minutes there. He's got a game against Hearts at the weekend, and these games coming up for Celtic are absolutely huge. We need a striker up there scoring goals and playing well. Some of his play was really good. Some of it, I just didn't think he looked comfortable, but I can kind of put that down to the pitch. But I think we'll find out over the next 3-4 weeks what Giakoumakis is all about. He
had a bit of a stunted pre-season. I think he may have caught COVID. I can't remember, but he certainly had an injury setback of some description as well. But I mean, I just feel like he's no really, I know this is a silly thing to say, but I just feel like he's not really that chance. Stephen, do you know what I mean? He's not really had that opportunity yet.
No, and it has been hard going for him, because he's been injured basically. Well, this maybe his 3rd or 4th appearance at all. 2 goals, which is fair enough, really, from so few appearances. He probably should have had another one. He should have done better. There was a chance right after it. He was clean through. He beat someone, I think, and the ball just seemed to get stuck under his feet for ages and ages, and eventually just sort of clipped it forward. But the truth is, whatever I could sit and say here about Giakoumakis, we desperately need him now. He's the main guy, and there's a conversation that's going to happen tonight about injuries and saving players for injuries as well. But like, he's all of a sudden become one of the most important players. He must be one of the most protected players in the squad at the moment, because we've simply got nothing else up front. I
mean, there was you've touched on it. It's something we need to mention. Like I said, it's like after the Betis game, these arguments started on social media about, well, why is Ange playing these guys? You need to save these guys for the bigger games coming up, and it's an argument that just holds no water for me.
No.
For a start, that's not in Ange's DNA. We know that already. Secondly, you need to win the game. And thirdly, that's an opinion that people, especially after injuries, specifically to Callum McGregor, the one everyone's talking about, that's an opinion people hold in retrospect.
Yeah.
Because say for talking's sake, no one ever mentioned the fact that we should rest Joe Hart. But say you rest him, you play Bain or Barkas, and they don't make the saves that Joe Hart does. Yep. No one ever says it's the right thing to do. But after these injuries to particularly McGregor, people are saying, oh, we need to save him. But I don't see. I know sometimes, Melly, managers will not overplay players in order to the same for injury, but we're just off the back of a break. It's the opposite at the moment.
We're just off the back of a break. Callum McGregor, Celtic's club captain, but the main thing with this injury is it's a head clash.
It's a freak.
It's not as if it's the hamstrings that we've been moaning about all season. Why are we getting all these injuries? None of the injuries were because of hamstrings or anything like that. They're all because of tackles or challenges. The McGregor one, I don't think it's malicious. It's just 2 guys going for the ball. It could happen anywhere. It's just one of these things. You kind of just hope it was a head knock, but it seems to be a bit worse than that. And again, with Celtic, it's just really bad luck, and it seems to be happening a lot this season. We spoke about it earlier on in the season when Kyogo and Callum McGregor were out. Celtic were a completely different team. They dropped a lot of points, and they just, even the Bayer Leverkusen game, they came back. We didn't look as good a team. Going into the most important period of the season right now over the next few weeks, we've got Hearts, we've got Dundee United, Rangers, Aberdeen and Motherwell. 3 out of the 5 of them are away from home. It's looking very tough for us. We're going to be without a captain, a top scorer. Maeda, Rogic, Turnbull. I mean, these guys are pretty much mainstays all season, all our best players. And fair enough, we've brought in 4 new players, but it's asking a lot for guys to settle in and go and try and beat Hearts. Is going to be hard enough, but we're all looking towards this Rangers game, and it's a team that have lost one league game in how long?
Nearly 1.5 seasons, or 1.5 seasons now. I know. The McGregor injury, you're right to point out the Betis game, because what I said at the time of that was, look, I always try and look for different angles, but that was simply indefensible. I can't come up with any reason that Kyogo should have played in that game with such a risk. But the Callum McGregor thing's totally different for all the reasons we've already discussed here. And with the benefit of hindsight, with the benefit of after the game looking back and say, well, he shouldn't have played. We could do that. Realistically, you could do that for half the team. Joe Hart, you've already said, that you could have easily said he's every bit as important to the team right now as Callum McGregor is. I've already said Giakoumakis. I'm not comparing these guys in terms of their overall ability or contribution.
But if he gets injured,
but he's the only centre forward just now, so I could easily make the case to say don't play him in that game because it's a lower league opposition, all that sort of stuff. But even looking back at the game, it wasn't a canter. Obviously Celtic were reasonably comfortable and got the job done and didn't look under too much threat, but they beat them 2-1 in a bruising encounter, I would describe it as. And it's not as if Callum McGregor was sacrificed in a 7-0 canter, playing with like a dodgy hamstring or something like that. He took a freak injury in a game that Celtic needed to win, because what if Celtic had drawn that or gone into extra? Whatever, there's so many things that could have gone wrong there.
And I think the nature of the Callum McGregor thing is, it is a freak injury. Now, there's been a lot of criticism of the manager about these players getting injured, and most of them were injured by Mohamed Niang, right? He was absolutely on one. He was on a mad one. He was on a tear for the first minute until basically the end of the game. I think he saw the whole game out. He only got one booking. He managed to injure 2 of our players. The Ideguchi challenge was the wild one, absolute wild one. There's been a lot of criticism of referees recently, and we've done it on this podcast, and we were talking about this on a couple of weeks ago. We said on the podcast that this is how bad referees are. A referee has a howler, just go into social media, 2 minutes later someone will have dug up 4 or 5 howlers for the guy in the past couple of seasons, and I forget the referee's name here. It's not written on my iPad here.
Don Robertson.
I forget the referee, Don Robertson, and people were pulling up David Turnbull, Kieran Tierney, both get away with bookings.
Shocking, I know.
It's not Ange Postecoglou's job necessarily to protect his players from wild challenges which result in injury. That's sensibly what the referee's there for. If the referee does his job, those 2 Celtic players are not getting injured. Maybe one might, but Nyang's off the park and it doesn't happen again. And you can't say the guy doesn't have previous. I heard on the Craig on the post-match podcast, the reaction podcast, said that this guy did not get sent off within 15 seconds in a game.
Yeah.
An absolute wild man. And then after it, somebody said in the Discord that he posted a picture of El Hadj Diouf up in his Instagram story in a Rangers shirt after. I don't know if that's true or not, by the way. It's just that it's hearsay. So the guy's an absolute, he was on one and he managed to take out 2 Celtic players. It's the referee's job to protect the Celtic players for injury, for that sort of thing, no the manager.
It's what we've been moaning about all season.
We don't moan on this podcast, Melly.
I'll find out that later. What we've been talking about all the time, these ones were particularly bad, but usually it's the wee incremental ones where you don't book somebody early on because it's too early on or it's his first foul, which results in this player being able to do 2 or 3 more before he's booked or even sent off. Very rarely sent off. This one, it was sort of over the other side from me, so it looked like a sort of 50-50 going in there, but it was the instant reaction of basically all the Celtic players going over to the referee.
Rogic, who's usually pretty cool as well, he doesn't get involved. He was furious.
He's a koala bear, isn't he?
It was good to see the players getting involved, but when you see it back, the referee's right beside it, and I know he gets the ball, but that doesn't give you carte blanche to fly through a challenge like that.
He was, you know how they say, you know how Stephen, you're not, no, but you know I can fight a wee bit, you know, I can fight a wee bit of punching, you know they say when you're trying to punch somebody and try to knock them out, you try and hit the back of their head, right, not their nose, right, like that. Melly, like, are you taking notes? Melly's taking some notes there, right? That's what Niang does. He doesn't tackle the guy with the ball, he tackles the guy behind the guy with the ball. He just flies right through.
Well, I've got a lot to say on this tackle, about the refereeing, about the coverage of it, about the tackle itself. I've got an awful lot to get through with this because I
Don't
think
let
it's
the pink
been.
hoodie fool you. By the way.
I think some of it has been hysterical. I mean hysterical literally. I mean like funny, as in not as an overreaction. Now, first of all, the tackle itself, Melly's already said that it doesn't give, just because you play the ball, it doesn't, the play doesn't stop there. You're not paused as soon as you connect with the ball. If you follow through a guy's shin, it's still a foul. It's ridiculous to say that any touch of the ball gives you, as Melly put it, carte blanche to do whatever you want. So that aside, I watched Sports Scene covered on it, and Richard, don't call me Ricky Foster, was on talking about this incident as well, and he wheeled out that thing that I've heard it as well. I've heard all the crap about it for decades about how, but what you need to do there is you need to go in harder because that protects you, right? And I was I can't believe people are still saying that, right? Because I remember that when I was a kid, right? That's what the dads who took your teams told you, are you going harder, son, and that'll protect.
Don't pull out, that's how you get injured.
Exactly. That's the biggest lot of unscientific pish I can imagine, right? How does increasing the force protect you? Right, it's the belief that if you go in harder, right, see if that is the case, I'd love for someone to go up to John Kennedy and tell him that's why he got injured all those years ago. That's why your career's over, son. You didn't go in hard enough in that Romanian guy.
It's Ideguchi's fault then for pulling out. My favourite thing about Ricky Foster is Richard Foster, sorry. Mr. Foster. My favourite thing about Mr. Foster is I heard him on Sports Sound many years ago, and he was talking about how he was in a shop and some school kids were having a go at him, right, for being rubbish, for being Richard Foster, and he lost the rag and got thrown out the shop. And then he took umbrage with his shop manager, the security guard, going, "Why are you throwing me out?" Is them bamming me up? And he's like, "Mate, you're a professional footballer in your 30s, and those are school children you're having a go at."
See his argument as well about Ideguchi going in harder. It doesn't make sense because he's playing the ball. So if Ideguchi goes in harder, the way he gets hit, his ankle goes under him. So if he goes in harder, surely his ankle completely snaps underneath him.
Do you know who we need to speak to about these biomechanics?
Oh, Mikey.
We need to get Michael. They should have had Michael Stewart on Sports Sound. No, sorry, what's Sports Scene?
Sports Scene, yeah.
I was coming to Sports Sound actually because the referee had a horror show. Rangers in the midweek. Did you? Rangers complained to the SFA about their refereeing guy's performance.
Well. Welcome aboard.
Aye, nothing wrong with referees. We don't complain to referees. We just got on with it. They had their first red card in 2 years, and they should have had 2 red cards because McGregor should have been off. There should have been another penalty against them. And then,
which they scored from the result, and when the play continued, they scored from that.
Yeah. So the referee got grassed in, and Rangers leaked to the press that they went to the SFA about the referees just to cheer their fans up and all that, and it was a whole load of nonsense. In fact, the Daily Record published a story off the back of it, which even I fell for, about Clancy being removed from games, which was an absolute nonsense. Melly went that, by the way, that story's nonsense. So ended up getting it. But I heard Darryl Broadfoot? No, Darryl.
Yeah, Broadfoot.
Is it Darryl Broadfoot? Yeah, Darryl Broadfoot on Sports Sound.
Darryl's rulebook.
Yeah. I heard Darryl Broadfoot, and he just was having he was having no criticism of referees at all, and I want to kind of address this because he was like, refereeing's a really difficult job, and he was like, players make mistakes and so do referees, and that's an argument you hear quite a lot, right? But see, when a player makes a mistake, right, what's short pass, playing the wrong pass, missing the goal, something like that, you can sometimes kind of understand what the player was trying to do.
Yeah.
Or he's mishit a ball, or it's a failed mechanical function of his body that has resulted in the mistake, right? The problem we have with referees, Darryl, is we see these decisions and we cannot reason or fathom what the referee, because I think it was the Ideguchi one, he's 2 yards from that tackle.
Yeah.
So what the problem we've got is we see these tackles happen, we see the referee 2 yards from it, we see an obstructed view, we see the player go down in a crumpled heap and get stretchered off and is out for a number of weeks, and the referee thought nothing of it. And that's the difference. When a player makes a mistake, 9 times out of 10 you can understand what the player's trying to do. When a referee makes a mistake, you just think, you're shite at your job.
I find it bizarre, the weird enabling we have in Scottish football of this ineptitude.
You're obsessed. That's what he said. He says we're obsessed in this country with refereeing performances.
Well, that's it exactly. Fans are guilty of it as well, because see, when Celtic or we, or as a podcast, we as fans, whatever, we're complaining about refs, all you get is, oh, it's a conspiracy in it, and 1,000 laughing emojis and Union Jacks strewn across the internet.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry, but I was speaking to a Rangers fan, right? And I went, oh, some of you laugh, you was going to the SFA about that. And he goes, how? I go, because you've not had a red card in 2 years, and he was abysmal. And I says, and McGregor, he should have been off. And he went, aye, so the ref was shite then. I went, yes, but if you say you included that in your complaint, I'll concede your point. But there's no way Rangers went the referee to grass their own keeper in.
No, and this is how it goes. Everyone laughs, oh, it's a conspiracy stuff. But then as soon as Rangers go and make a complaint about it, we do the exact same. See, I thought it was a conspiracy. And the implication there is that the opposite side are almost defending the ref. No, it's not the ref, it's just your paranoia, isn't it? When meanwhile, if we were just to take a look around, everyone is complaining about the refs, and we're all just slagging each other for it. If we could actually, God forbid, stop slagging each other for it and band together somehow.
Focus on the real enemy.
Yeah, exactly. Focus on the real enemy. We might be able to get something done about this, rather than just sort of almost inadvertently defending the refs every time your rival is attacking them.
I've said this before. Everyone involved in football, from the Premier League and some of the leagues below, it's their livelihood, it's their life, it's their full-time job. They do it 24/7, Monday to Sunday. Referees have another career. They saunter into the games, make a complete arse for it, saunter away, and you're not allowed to criticise them. It's a mental state of affairs.
See, the professional thing, before that, I've heard that argument made a lot, but would that actually fix it? Because, right, say for example, you own a restaurant and you hire a chef, right, and he's really good at it, right, brilliant, but his main thing is that every time he turns away with food, he drops it on the floor. Would you necessarily go, do you know what we should do? We should pay that guy more?
Well, see, what I see when I see celebrity ref Bobby Madden on Instagram flying all over the world, business class flights, living it up, getting paid fortunes to go and referee these games and make an arse of them in other countries. The Bobby Madden international tour of arsed refereeing, right? I think give that guy 60 grand a year.
It's not really about giving them more money. It's about them doing more training, so that I know they do have to do fitness tests and all that, and they need to turn up 2 or 3 times a week and do all that, and then they've got the game as well. But if you're a referee, you can maybe, in your full time, you're maybe getting more rules not taught to you, but you're watching more, you're analysing more things, you can do more fitness, so you're keeping up with the game as well. You can maybe go and watch teams train to see, I can understand more where players come from, rather than just, I know better than you. You know what they're like. They might see the amount of managers that have been booked at Celtic Park, there's some games I watch, because they're moaning about the referees as well as us moaning about the referees. Surely we can all just come together and go, come on, sort this nonsense.
Do you know what I think it is, genuinely, and we'll return to the game after this. I genuinely think refereeing in this country, right, they've given themselves such a bad name with their ineptitude, with their supposed biases, with their apparent biases once they've left the refereeing profession. They've poisoned the well of refereeing in this country, right? There are only, would any of you go be a referee?
No.
Never. Nobody wants this job, right? So the result of that...
I'm making shitloads at a podcast.
So the result of that is the only ones who want it, right, are crap at it. Yeah. And you can't go and sack... Look, Bobby Madden, as much as I hate it, it's probably one of the better referees, right? I just like calling him celebrity ref. But you can't sack Kevin Clancy, Bobby Madden, Andrew Dallas, John Beaton. You can't sack these guys because the ones waiting to come through are worse. So I think that's the issue. I think over these years they've poisoned the well of refereeing, that nobody really wants the job anymore, and you can't just bin the guys and get new ones in because the ones that are there are worse.
I think as much as I'm making a really sort of labelled analogy with hiring someone else in some other job and throwing money at it to fix it, it probably would work long term if you started a professional referee program today. In 10 years, we might have decent refs.
Yeah, because people would be appealed to go for the job. That's how I can make a good career for myself.
Yeah, but trying to fix it now by making it professional is like the ineptitude, the word we keep using. That is such that you're basically trying to fix a problem that all he keeps doing is falling down the stairs, really, and we're trying to fix that with more money at it.
Can they not just go on strike again? We can get the foreign guys in. We had a wee guy from Malta one time. He was absolutely terrific. Happy New Year. From our friends over at Manscaped. The ball has officially dropped, but that doesn't mean you have to drop the ball on your balls. It's time to bring sexy back in 2022 and step up your game with the Manscaped Performance Package 4.0. Join 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped to help them ring in the new year with the right tools for the job. Go to manscaped.com, use discount code TIMS for 20% off and free shipping. It's a new year and a new you, and a new you means, Stephen,
new, freshly shorn balls.
Yes.
Yep, down there. Let's get it all fixed, gentlemen. It's 2022. Time to let go of that thatch.
the read says a new you means no pubes. More succinct than what Stephen did. And the read also says the host is to talk about what new grooming routines they will try in 2022. And do you know what? I'm looking at you guys. You guys are pretty in good shape. You're pretty trim, Melly, pretty active. Stephen, pretty active. So I've decided it's time dust off the old boxing gloves. I'm going to start looking after myself. I'm getting old, Stephen.
Yep.
We're not getting any younger. So I'm going to start taking care of the skin as well. So skin, fitness, and hairlessness is all part of that package. So if you would like to trim your balls and have them looking lovely, manscaped.com, discount code TIMS, free shipping, 20% off, manscaped.com, discount code TIMS. Turn our attention back to the Alloa game. Tom Roderick's one of the players that were losing on international duty along with Maeda. Are they the only two?
Yeah.
I was pretty surprised to see Rio Atati didn't get a call up. Kyogo's obviously injured. Nobody really knows how long he's out for. Part of me's hoping that the Kyogo thing's a bit of a conspiracy, that we're kind of like keeping quiet about Kyogo's injury in the hope that he flies under the radar a wee bit. I don't know if that's a thing, and I don't know if Kyogo...
That's Kyogo's music, just as I'm about to announce the lineup.
I don't know if he would necessarily go for that. Do you think... What do you think Tom Roderick's performances have been like recently in the two games?
Not great, but sometimes he takes a wee while to get up to speed. Sometimes he just baffles you by how good he is. And again, it's hard to judge players on that pitch because it was terrible. The Hibs game, he wasn't at his best, but he done all right. But at the same time, I'm looking at this and going, would I rather have Tom Rogic for the next few weeks? Oh boy, I would, because we lose Rogic and it's a blow. Adding to that, Turnbull and McGregor, these guys have been the best midfield three we've had this season. We do have said all season we need reinforcements in there. We maybe need something different. But to lose one of them's massive. To lose all three, what's bigger than massive? It's huge, bigger than massive, or is massive the biggest?
It's bigger than that. It's large.
Ginormous. It is. And we're looking at this. I don't want to get too far ahead away from the Alloa game and towards this Rangers game, but that seems to be the main game. But at the same time, going into the Hearts away game, that is a big game. We've already lost it up there this season. So looking at it going into that game, it could be a midfield three of Ideguchi or McCarthy, Hatate and O'Reilly. It's very inexperienced, and I know inexperience isn't everything, but if we look towards the Hearts game or maybe even the Rangers game further down, Celtic could feasibly line up with Hart, Juranovic, Starfelt, Carter-Vickers, Scales. Into midfield we could have Ideguchi, Hatate, O'Reilly. Up front, Abada, Jota and Giacomakis, all guys signed this season. And if we go into the Rangers game or Tynecastle away or any of these games, most of those guys haven't played against these teams before, or just making their debut pretty much, and going into the big game against Rangers or Hearts even, it's a big ask for that brand new team, a very young team, a very inexperienced team, a midfield that has barely played together, and go out and win these huge games for us. It's going to be something very difficult for Celtic, and that's why I'm worried about Rogic. Even if he hasn't been great the last two games, he'd be starting every game if he was available.
That's the thing, Stephen. We thought we had options. A couple of injuries with these massive games. The games don't get any smaller. We're already looking at it going, as Melly said, like I'm listening to him name the potential lineup for a couple of these important games we've got coming up. Thank God it's no great. We brought in Matt O'Reilly, Ange. Naughty. he said anyone that we're linked to is lies. A couple of days later, a player turns up, so I can't believe a word the man says anymore. This guy looks like a real prospect. I heard his interview, I heard him talking, I've read some of the stuff in the press about him. He seems really career focused. And he says there was a couple of clubs in from him. Usual story, once I heard from Celtic. They're never going to do these club interviews and go, well, Blackburn went in for me too, and tell you what, I was tempted, but but Celtic offered more money. But he seems like someone maybe in the Ryan Christie mould?
Yeah, potentially. I think I'd read or heard that he'd turned down a longer contract at Fulham originally in his younger days as well to try and go and further his career. It's something you maybe rarely hear these days, somebody who is focused quite so much on progression. So that's good to hear. Can't sit here and say that I know an awful lot about him other than we're going to have scouting conducted on him and all that. So
yeah, I think actually this is a good point to plug the Patreon.
Yeah,
We've not had an opportunity to do that. So you will see us here, brand new studio, masses of equipment, cameras and recorders and microphones everywhere, and the studio itself. All this is paid for by the support of our patrons, patreon.com/20minutetims, and in return for their support, which starts at around £2.50 per month, they get scouting podcasts, match reaction podcasts, feature podcasts of all description, data. There's a whole lot in there. There'll be a link in the comments below, whether you're listening or watching on YouTube, patreon.com/20minutetims. And one of the things we are doing on that is a full scouting podcast for any new players that Celtic signed, and we've got a full scouting podcast coming up on Rangers as well ahead of that game. Stephen?
Yeah, from what I can gather, from what little information I can gather, and ever since it was kind of sprung upon us, just that all of a sudden we just signed this guy. He looks a good all-rounder, looks a good physical presence as well, which is something we've not really seen
6
much
foot
of.
odd as well, yeah.
Devastatingly handsome man as well.
Annoying,
have to get it out there. Annoying, just an irritatingly handsome man. So looking forward to getting him into the team. But yeah, it can only be a good thing if he's a good prospect, then absolutely great. But I think he's going to be very much one for right now. I don't think he's one of these like teenagers we pick up. He's got a lot of first team experience. He's got 7 goals this season for MK Dons. This isn't a guy we're going to have to work on for a couple of seasons and stick him out on loan. I think he's very much with an eye on making some kind of contribution quite soon.
It would have been ideal to get him in for the Alloa game. That would have been one. Do you know what? Just get him in there if you didn't bring him on. But he didn't get international clearance, so he's going to look like he's probably going to make his debut against Hearts at Tynecastle. Then it's Dundee United, Rangers, Aberdeen and Motherwell. It's into the fray for him. And look, this is what we'll learn a lot about Celtic over the next few games. It's between now and the Raith Rovers game. We've got those 5 games I'm talking about.
It's make or break, isn't it? This is the league.
Right out my mouth. Make or break time for Celtic. And unfortunately, I think we've just come up at a time where we've got guys in international duty, but adding to your captain and your top goal scorer being out injured, you bring in Maeda as a sort of replacement or a different option. He goes away. Turnbull and Rogic out again. I keep going on about it, but every one of those players would be a starter for Celtic, and they're going to be out for an important period in the season.
There was something else I wanted to mention about the Alloa game. Now,
all right.
It kind of slipped anyone's attention that they are managed by a certain individual, Barry Ferguson. Now, we can talk about the tactics, the bully boy tactics. Barry barreled Francis Ferguson. Barrington, he may have his own motivations for going out and stiffing a few Celtic players. But something that only caught my attention today since the game was that his assistant is Robert Francis Malcolm as well.
The worst.
Yeah, Bob Malcolm is in the dugout with him as well. And a story from 2010 caught my attention today. Have you seen this?
Yes.
I've not seen the story, but I've seen like people tweet about the story.
Yeah, so long story short, Ange Postecoglou managed Bob Malcolm in Australia, and it was one of these stories, and it's amazing how just the perception in these tabloid framings that you can go. Many years later, we now know kind of more about it, but it was framed as Bob Malcolm almost quit football after being banned from smiling by crazy coach Ange Postecoglou.
Was this from the time?
Yeah, it's from 2010. Okay. So he's cracking up about how he was banned from smiling. What I am extrapolating from that is that you went to Australia for a jolly.
Yeah. Came up against.
Ange came in, turned the music off and told you to sort yourself out, and you didn't like it. That's what I'm taking from that. Because see this, it'd be very easy for us to read a story today, maybe about some, let's say, Chilean coach or something like that, pulling zany antics and been branded a crazy coach in the tabloids.
Pedro Caixinha, basically.
Does Ange Postecoglou strike you as a particularly zany character all these years later?
I've seen Bob Malcolm. Used to work in an ice cream van. All the sweets used to magically disappear. Bob Malcolm.
Did they sell single fags at it?
Yeah. Bob Malcolm has a smile like a pocket full of raisins. So I would ban him from smiling as well, because I don't want to look into that cavernous gub looking back at me. I do feel bad for Australians because we send a lot of crap their way I noticed that Jason Cummings has
right.
and
Cumdog.
Yeah, Cumdog has went to. Is
So
it
unpleasant.
it's off-putting, isn't it? He went to Brisbane Roar, I think, or I think one of these teams anyway.
Roar Salona?
Apologies, I know we've got.
I thought it was I don't think it was Brisbane Roar.
Was it? You know what? It doesn't matter. The point I'm making is I'm apologising on behalf of Scotland for this guy because they made a big song and dance about him joining. They had like the meme and then his stupid hand tattoo and all that sort of stuff. And I thought, yous are making a big fanfare here, like you're actually getting a good player. The reality is he's washed up.
Do you remember that just put me in mind of years ago, just nothing to do with Celtic. Do you remember, was it Darius Vassell
went to Turkey?
Went to Turkey, and there was like thousands of people turned up to the airport just to welcome him in the country.
I don't want to patronise Australia. I don't think it's quite Darius Vassell going to Turkey levels, but it was just the social media output from this particular team. They were like cock a hoop about getting Jason Cummings. Like Dundee, one of the worst teams in the league, have offloaded one of the worst players in their team. And you know, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You got something to say there, Miley? Did we croak, which usually suggests you're about to
just
speak?
Just got to say something about him turning up to open goal and then not being a bit worse for wear the next day in training.
Of
but
course,
I'll not do
that's
that.
what happened. Yeah, he was more or less sacked from one of the worst teams in the league. Anyway, Hearts midweek, certainly not one of the worst teams in the league.
Nope.
Away, Tynecastle. I feel like every time you talk about Tynecastle, you have to say always a difficult tie. It is going to be a difficult tie. Probably John Souttar's last game for them before Rangers stump up and pay the fee that's required for them. Have we got cause for concern coming up against Hearts, Melly?
I think we do it any time, but as I've been banging on about all this podcast, with the way Celtic are going to be potentially lining up, it's going to be very, very difficult. Hearts have been in good form most of the season. They had a wee blip pre-Christmas, but they seem to have got back in winning ways. They're comfortably the third best team in the league right now. So going up there, we've seen at the very start of the season, Celtic were very undercooked. We were all over the place. Starfelt played after a day or two of training. Kyogo made his debut after getting off the plane, basically. Came on as a sub. So Celtic have come a long way since then, but the lineup hasn't come a long way, if you know what I mean. Celtic have done well. We've got into a winning position. We've beat Hearts twice since then. But it's always good to see how we get on in these powder keg away games, because it is always one of those stadiums you like going to. But just looking at the potential lineup for Celtic and the players missing, it's going to take a lot for us to beat them. I still think we can do it, but it is make or break, as you said, for the next few weeks for Celtic.
No excuses, Stephen. I mean, this is the league. We've got lots of players. We've got injuries. The graph seems to go up and down just when you think you're reaching the top. You sort of slip back down again there with your selection and stuff like that. Hearts have won 4 of their last 5, the same as us, but like, the games are tough, but we need to put our big boy pants on, don't we, and just get it done.
We do. Welcome to big school. Celtic new signings. The thing about it's very difficult to just forget about the opening day of the season. Losing the first league game of the season is always going to be difficult, and it's hard to put your mind back to that and frame it a wee bit differently, because everyone's in total panic stations. It's hard to imagine back to then when we've got a new manager in and everyone's saying, no, Ange who and all that, and then you go and lose your first game of the season. It's a difficult start. But
good refereeing performance that night, wasn't it?
That's exactly what I was going to say. I don't want to come across as sour grapes, but Celtic could easily have won that game and then you get other different... The other day, I'm trying to frame it a different way than saying probably should have had a goal that was chopped off for no reason and all that. So it wasn't as bad as is made out. Starfelt was terrible, as we've mentioned it all along. But Celtic have played Hearts a number of times, or twice since, and it was fairly easy. There was one, was it in the Cup? Where it was a really, really one-sided game that the scoreline sort of flattered. So as much as I would never dream of talking about rocking up to Tynecastle and just cantering it, I think Celtic have probably got reason to be confident about it. I don't think we should be terrified of going to Tynecastle. It's always a difficult place to go and all that, and it's always hateful.
The thing is, I'm always a wee bit worried about Tynecastle. There's always trepidation there, and I'd still be worried even if we still had our full lineup.
Oh, definitely. It's a hard place to go. There's not many teams that have went there and won this season, and just looking at Celtic, the way we're going to line up, we're just back from the break, which is fine. We're only 2 games in. Alloa game, you probably can't take much away from it. But if I'm looking at what Celtic's potential lineups, up front, Giakoumakis is in, barely played this season. Jota just back from injury. On the other side, who's it going to be? Is it going to be Abada, who scored a great goal against Alloa, but his performances out wide haven't been great. The other potential is James Forrest, who hasn't been great. If you're going into midfield in these games, the midfield battle is key, and we could possibly have 2 Japanese guys in there that don't really speak the language yet, and a guy
They
that
can talk to each other though.
They can talk to each other, but poor Matt O'Reilly will just have to stand there and look good. So it's going to need to be a blend of guys inexperienced making their debut. I don't know if we'll bring in McCarthy or Beaton just to do something. I don't even know if Ideguchi or Abada will make it due to their injuries. So it's going to be one where you're going to have to wait till the possibly last minute, look at the lineup and go, this is what we go with, and we just need to go out and try our best to win the game.
James McCarthy looked motivated against Alloa. He did a lot of running and a lot of moving, more than I've seen him before when he came on in that game. Look, the prize at the end of these fixtures here, Stephen, is if we get to the Rangers game not having dropped any more points, we can beat Rangers potentially, or if we beat Rangers rather, bring that down to 1 point. That's pressure on them.
Yep.
That's pressure on them that
yeah.
they've had the benefit of not really having that much pressure on them all season. We've always kind of started from behind, breathing down their necks with 1 point. Now they're away to Livy. I mean, we seem to struggle at Livy. They don't seem to struggle away to Livy. But we just need to keep the pressure on, and hopefully.
I think they're at home at Livy this weekend.
Is it home? Are they at home? Well, there you go. They're not going to lose.
Midweek, sorry.
Midweek, yeah, they're not going to lose. So,
is what you're trying to say that when you saw that Gio Van Bronckhorst started talking about wanting to VAR the wind,
yeah,
the cracks were starting to appear?
Well, I'd never seen a Rangers manager say, you know, that wind there, it moved the ball. Maybe if we had VAR. Stop talking about VAR. Do you know what I mean?
VAR isn't going to solve all your problems, and that goes for anyone.
Going to make your problems worse.
It's not going to help end these problems insofar as it's the same referees that we spoke about, except they're looking at a TV screen. There's one more incompetent looking at the TV screen anyway. The referees have had enough.
What about wee Gio's face when he seen the Loving Cup he was at?
Do you know what? I sympathise with Gio. I looked at that and I thought that's the face I'd be making if I saw grown men drinking out the same cup. Look,
two clubs, 1 cup.
Yes, it is.
Oh my God.
Look, the Living Cup's weird, right? It's the weirdest thing in Scottish football, tradition and all that, but that's weird. Mikey Johnson's rumoured to be going away on loan to Aberdeen. I think he's someone that really needs to get some game time and really needs to make the most of his Celtic career, and probably going on loan to Aberdeen might help him. But the injuries that we had against Alloa, it's probably scuppered that. We might need to call on Mikey Johnson at some point. Do you see he's going back into the transfer window, Mail? Do you think we need to? Is there, if you could say to Ange, like Ange phones you up and goes, Martin Melly from 20 Minute Tim's podcast, I have one token here which grants me one player into the club. Which position do you think I should use it on?
Oh, it's difficult because I think Celtic have addressed everything that I wanted them to. They brought in 3 midfielders. I thought 2 central midfielders, and a guy that can play out wider up front. It's difficult because it would depend on the deal. Like if we could go out and sign a player.
Exciting wee question. He's ruining there, isn't it?
Well, do we sign a player short term just because we've got injuries right now? Like Cal McGregor, we don't know how long it's going to be. Kyogo, we don't know how long it's going to be. If we've got players coming back, are we going to bring in a guy and he's not going to play long term? Maybe a loan deal, a striker or a wide player on loan for 6 months might be the ideal, whether that deal's doable or not. But if we had everybody back, I'd probably say we're looking good shape, but we simply don't. So yes, a loan deal for somebody up front.
I'd agree. I think the Kyogo injury, you're hearing rumours for 6 weeks to 6 games to the end of the season and all that sort of stuff. I saw something on social media just before we started. Celtic updated their Instagram story. And someone suggested that Cal McGregor was actually training. They thought you could hear his voice in the background. I really doubt it.
I think somebody said Callum, but they actually said Carl. So.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
his face did look at Daniel Mastorovic was come to mind when I saw McGregor's face. But Stephen, same question to you. Big Ange phones up Stephen from the 20 Minute Tim's podcast.
Yeah, I'm always going to take the opportunity to get a new player, and I haven't really thought about what we might need though. I think we
decent backup goalie, or do you think the focus really has to be on outgoings? Soro probably going to go. Barkas, Ayeti. There's loads of guys just cutting about that probably need to go. Yeah,
well, Ange has been quite honest, but we're also quite guarded about that as well. He's obviously been
Sorry to interrupt, but I should say that Ayeti's injured.
Twice.
So, the likelihood of Ayeti going before we discuss it any further. It's probably really slim because he's injured.
Yeah, well, that's true. He's been, as I say, he's been asked about this a number of times. Look, because everybody knows Celtic need rid of players. There's no way we can afford to carry guys like Sorrow, Bolingoli. We've this list of players we've rhymed off so many times over the weeks. We can't afford to carry guys like that, just passengers all season or any more than this season. We need to start getting rid of these guys. But I don't think there's anything urgent in the transfer window just right now. I take on board that we've got a lot of injuries at the time, but I'm not bothered about keeper at all. We spoke about that last week. Scott Bain will be fine, right? I mean, that's the best I can say about it. I'm not really that bothered about it. Mikey Johnson himself, now, this is the start of something for him, right? It's either this thing that's going to kickstart his Celtic career a la Ryan Christie, or it's going to be the start of his exit from Celtic. It's going to be one of those two things. Now, that's obviously very obvious to say, but I'm not. The reason I say it is just because people should probably be open to the idea that it might not work out for him going forward. Because we've seen young guys go out on loan before, and as much as Mikey looked like the next kind of generational talent, the next Aidan McGeady and stuff like that, he might not be, and he might just be one of these guys who ends up playing for a lesser club than Celtic. I still hope he does well. I still hope he proves himself at Aberdeen and comes back ready to stake a claim for Celtic. But it depends what happens in his absence, because you can say, right, there's still a player in there, we'll take him back. But then is he going to be behind Jota? Going to be behind Mayes? Going to be behind Forrest? Going to be behind Abada for each side? He can't really play through the middle. So it depends what you're bringing him back to and for what reason. So all I can say is that let's hope he does well. Let's hope he does well and proves us wrong.
I still like him. I still think there's a player there. I don't know if I'd be letting him go right now, but it's a difficult one. Football would obviously benefit him there. Stephen Glass is obviously better than if it was going to say Derek McInnes or something like that. But Aberdeen signed a former Dutch under-20 international today as well. So they're going to go out and sign two wingers. I don't know, but if he's going to. There's been some Hibs
chat as well. There's been some,
between now and the end of the season, it's possibly make or break for Mikey Johnson again as well, isn't it?
Make a break for Mikey Johnson, make a break for Celtic. Really big ties coming up. The season could be over in the next couple of weeks. We've got to make sure we get full points against Hearts. Melly, any final thoughts?
No.
Wow, Stephen.
My final thought is to for sure stop asking us if we'll get any final thoughts, because we never do have, and we don't prepare for these things.
Spring it on you every single week. I'm going to ask you if you get any mid-podcast thoughts at some point. Just Stephen, hit me with a thought. Anyway, on that bombshell, we would say goodbye. Thank you so much to everyone who watches us on YouTube. Thanks to everyone who listens and subscribes on all platforms. Especially thank you to those who support us. If you would like to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/20minutetims. But most of all, thank you for watching and listening.